Welcome to Night World. The fog that rolled across Pine Valley Forest that evening did not behave like normal mist. It clung to the ground like something alive, weaving around the boots of Ethan Miller as he stepped off the shuttle van and stared at the lonely wooden camp building ahead. It was his first night as a ranger, a job he took because it paid well, because he needed escape, because he thought forests were peaceful. But the silence here was wrong. The trees leaned inward, towering like watching giants, and somewhere deep within the darkness, something moved with a slow, deliberate pacing. Ethan froze, breath held, listening, but the sound stopped the moment he focused on it. Inside the main cabin, the lights flickered the same way the hiring manager's voice had trembled on the phone. "Night shifts are hard," she'd said. "We've lost people before. Some leave. Some don't." At the time, Ethan thought she meant stress, burnout, maybe bear attacks. But the empty break room, the untouched coffee mugs, the open logbooks with pens still lying where someone left mid-sentence, they felt like the building still belonged to people who should have been here, just not living anymore. He placed his bag down and the old floorboards creaked like something crawling beneath them, reacting to his weight. He stepped into the surveillance cabin where 3 monitors glowed with grainy black and white feeds of the surrounding forest. Tall pines. Darkness. Windless branches. But as he leaned closer, a shadow moved between the trees, too tall to be an animal, too smooth to be human. It glided, not walked. The motion sensor didn't trigger. No heat signature flashed red. The shadow simply passed through the clearing as if it were made of smoke. Ethan blinked, and it was gone. He leaned back, heart pounding, telling himself it was a glare, a distortion. But the screen's reflection showed his own face pale and hollow, his eyes not moving though he was certain he was blinking. Outside, a cold metallic ringing echoed, the kind of sharp, unnatural tone that comes from something hitting metal. Ethan grabbed his ranger jacket and stepped into the night. The forest swallowed him instantly. No wind. No birds. No insects. Just a crushing stillness that felt heavy, like the air itself thickened to keep him from running. The ringing came again, this time closer, drawing him toward the maintenance shed where the tools were kept. As he approached, the padlock hung open though it had been locked earlier. Inside, the smell of rust mixed with something strange, something sweet and rotten. Tools lay scattered on the floor like someone grabbed them in a rush. His flashlight slid across the walls until it caught a smear of something dark reddish, thick, dragged across the wooden boards. His throat tightened. He followed the smear to the back of the shed where it stopped abruptly as if whatever caused it simply vanished. No footprints. No exit. Nothing disturbed the dust except a faint circle as if someone had stood perfectly still for hours. Ethan swallowed hard, feeling a vibration in the floor, subtle but real, like distant footsteps deep underground, moving slowly beneath him. He stepped out of the shed, but the fog outside had grown thicker, now rising past his knees like a cold ocean. His radio crackled with static, then a voice whispered through it, low, distorted, almost human. "Ethan, don't go deeper." He froze. No one knew he'd arrived. No one should be on the radio at this hour. The static hissed, then another whisper came, softer and trembling, "It's watching you." Ethan backed away, gripping the radio tightly, scanning the tree line for movement. The trees blurred together into a black wall of shapes, each branch twisting slightly, like crooked fingers reaching. A branch snapped behind him. Ethan spun, flashlight shaking. Nothing. Just fog and silence. But then, footsteps. Light, dragging, uneven, approaching from the left. He raised the light and caught a glimpse of something ducking behind a tree. He stepped back toward the cabin, fear tightening around his ribs. The footsteps came again. Closer. Then a voice whispered from behind the nearest pine, "We didn't leave. We never left." Ethan stumbled, nearly dropping the flashlight. The voice was cracked, hollow, like vocal cords scraped against metal. He ran toward the cabin. But halfway there, he stopped dead. A figure stood in front of the cabin door. A woman. Ranger uniform. Long black hair covering most of her face. She was still. Too still. Ethan's breath caught in his chest. He raised his light and the woman vanished as if dissolving into the fog. The cabin door creaked open by itself. Ethan didn't want to go in, but the forest behind him felt alive now, the trees shifting, leaning, closing in. Inside the cabin, the lights flickered violently. Papers scattered across the counters as if brushed by invisible hands. The radio clicked on by itself and a man's voice whispered, "You took my shift." Ethan stared at the radio in disbelief. Who is this?" he whispered. The voice replied, trembling with rage and despair, "My name was Connor Hayes. I worked here before you. Until the forest took me." Ethan froze. That name was on the list of missing staff who vanished without a trace. The voice grew urgent. "It knows you're sent now. It knows you're alone. It won't let you leave." Ethan felt his skin crawl as he turned slowly toward the surveillance screens. On all three monitors, the same figure stood at the tree line, tall, pale, formless, its head tilting slowly, watching the cabin. Watching him. "Run," the voice whispered. "Before it reaches the second tree." Ethan stared at the screen. The figure stepped past the first tree. Subscribe for more stories from Night World. Ethan bolted toward the back exit of the ranger cabin, his breath sharp and ragged as he shoved the door open into the freezing night. The fog had climbed to his waist now, swirling like it recognized him, wrapping around his legs with cold, ghostly fingers. The forest ahead was darker than before, darker than night should ever be, its trees towering like shadowed guardians of something ancient. Behind him, the cabin lights flickered violently, buzzing with electricity as if reacting to the presence of something enormous. Ethan didn't look back. He could feel a pressure in the air, a heavy presence watching him from the tree line. He sprinted toward the old staff cabins, the ones he was told to avoid because they were under renovation. But even from a distance, he saw that the roofs had collapsed inward, boards were splintered outward, and claw-like rips decorated the walls. No animal did that. No human could. As he approached the first cabin, he stopped. The front door was open, swinging on a single hinge, creaking in the wind that technically didn't exist. He raised his flashlight, but the beam dimmed as if something devoured the light itself. Inside, the floor was covered in ripped sleeping bags, shredded clothing, and deep gouges carved into the wooden floor. His breath trembled as he stepped inside. The air was thick, damp, and colder than outside. His flashlight flickered and suddenly illuminated a message scratched into the far wall. "Don't let it see you move." Blood had dried around the carved letters. Ethan's heart hammered so violently he felt it in his throat. Something scraped faintly above him, slow, dragging like nails across the wooden ceiling. He didn't dare move the light. Not yet. His fingers shook so hard the flashlight slipped slightly. And the scraping stopped instantly. Silence. Not silence like emptiness, the heavy kind, like someone holding their breath inches from your skin. Ethan's mind raced. The missing staff. The disappearances. The warnings. Connor Hayes' trembling voice. All of it pointed to one horrific truth: something in this forest hunted them. Something that didn't behave like anything born on Earth. He slowly backed out of the cabin, each step controlled, careful not to make sudden movements. The forest outside was no safer, but at least the open air didn't feel like a mouth waiting to close around him. As he stepped out, the trees shifted again, not swaying, but bending subtly toward him, as if listening to his heartbeat. Then he heard it. A low, distorted breathing from somewhere above the tree line. Deep. Wet. Rattling. The kind of sound lungs make when they aren't lungs anymore. He backed slowly until his heel touched something soft. Ethan froze. He turned his head just enough to look down. A boot. But not just a boot, someone's leg was still inside it. It lay half buried in the fog, the rest of the body nowhere in sight. The fabric was a ranger uniform. Freshly torn. The blood around it was dark and wet. Ethan stumbled back, horror tightening every nerve in his body. Before he could run, the radio at his belt crackled with static, so loud it echoed through the trees, and Connor's voice whispered, desperate and broken, "Please, don't look at its face. Don't ever look." Ethan grabbed the radio, whispering back, "What is it? What's happening here? Why us?" The voice answered with a single sentence that chilled his spine, "It doesn't hunt people, it hunts replacements." And then the radio cut out. He didn't have time to process it. Branches snapped behind him, fast, many, like something massive weaving between trees with impossible speed. Ethan sprinted toward the fire tower at the edge of camp, the only structure tall enough that whatever was out there would struggle to reach him. His legs burned as he ran uphill, fog dragging behind him. Halfway up the trail, he tripped over another object. A backpack. He recognized the tag Ranger Mateo Ruiz, one of the missing. His name had been written on the missing staff list with a date beside it, 3 weeks ago. Ethan opened the pack with trembling fingers. Inside were torn maps, a shattered flashlight, and a small journaled pages wrinkled from moisture and scribbled in frantic handwriting. He flipped through the smeared pages, reading fragments. It doesn't follow sound. It follows breath. The trees shift to show it where you are. The fog isn't fog. It's the dead trying to warn us. Ethan felt the ground vibrate. Something walked nearby. Heavy. Slow. One step. Then another. The vibration traveled through his knees. He looked up and in the shadows between 2 pines, a shape stood tall. Taller than any human. Motionless. But its head slowly tilted, bending too far to one side, like snapping branches under its own skull. Ethan stumbled backward, barely keeping quiet. The thing didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't blink if it even had eyes. The fire lookout tower was now only a short run away. Ethan sprinted, lungs burning, heart exploding in his chest. The fog parted unnaturally around him, like fleeing from something behind him rather than blocking his path. He grabbed the tower ladder and climbed 3 rungs when something cold wrapped around his ankle. Ethan screamed, kicking violently. His flashlight fell and smashed on the ground, plunging everything into darkness except the distant, faint glow of the moon. Whatever held him tightened, pulling him down. His other foot slipped, shin slamming into metal. He clawed at the rungs, pulling with every ounce of strength. The grip loosened not because he escaped, but because whatever grabbed him stepped back, as if letting him go on purpose. Ethan didn't wait to question it. He climbed higher, faster, until he collapsed inside the tower's cabin, gasping. The wind, or what he hoped was wind, whispered around the wooden structure. He crawled to the window. Down below, the fog churned in circles around the base of the tower, like something pacing, waiting. The treetops swayed, but not from wind, from something pushing through them. Ethan realized with horror that he hadn't escaped. He had only climbed into a cage made of wood and glass. The radio on his belt crackled softly. Connor's voice returned, barely audible, trembling. You climbed into its territory. It likes when they climb. That's how it got the last one. Ethan's skin turned to ice. What does it want? He whispered. Connor answered with a voice that sounded like the last breath of someone already dead. It wants what we all left behind. It wants our faces. Below, the fog parted, revealing a tall shape standing at the base of the tower, staring straight up at him. Subscribe, while you still can. Ethan pressed his back against the tower wall, every muscle shaking as the figure below stood perfectly still, its body stretched unnaturally tall among the fog. Its limbs dangled wrong, elbows bending subtly in the opposite direction, head tilted in a heavy angle like the neck had snapped long ago. It didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't sway in the wind. It simply watched him from the ground, its shape pulsating ever so slightly with each second, as though it were resisting the urge to climb. Ethan stepped away from the window, chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. The wooden floor vibrated beneath him in slow, rhythmic thumps. Something below was touching the tower supports. Testing them. Feeling them. Measuring how easy it would be to bring the structure down. The night thickened outside the glass. The moon was swallowed by rolling clouds, leaving the tower trapped in a darkness so absolute Ethan could barely see his own shaking hands. The radio crackled again, just once, then went silent. He lifted it carefully, whispering into it. Connor! Connor, are you there? But the radio only emitted a faint tap-tap sound, like someone's fingernail brushing the microphone from inside the forest. Ethan lowered it, terrified of what would answer if he pressed the call button again. A sudden knock hit the wall behind him, light, polite, like someone asking to come in. He froze. The knock came again, harder, from the far side of the tower. Then the other side. Then all sides, surrounding him in a gentle, horrifying rhythm. He crawled forward and pressed his ear to the floor. Beneath him, he could hear whispering. Dozens of voices, some male, some female, some trembling and broken, layered over each other like a choir of the dead. They whispered his name. Not in warning. Not in fear. In hunger. Ethan covered his ears, but the voices were inside him now, sliding like cold fingers across his thoughts. Come down, they whispered. Come down. Your shift is over. He pushed himself into the corner, gripping the metal railing of the small interior hatch door. But the whispering didn't stop. It grew stronger, louder, until one voice separated from the rest. A woman's voice. Soft. Pained. Ethan, please help me, his breath caught. He knew that voice. He hadn't heard it in years, not since the night he watched her die on a hospital bed, his sister, Lily. Impossible. Impossible. He stood with trembling legs, stepping toward the window. The fog below shifted like a hand sliding across the forest floor, making room for something rising from beneath it. A face slowly appeared from the mist, Lily's face. Pale. Wet with tears. Eyes hollow and blurry like they were underwater. Her lips moved silently before her voice echoed inside Ethan's skull. You couldn't save me, she whispered. But you can save me now, just come down. Ethan staggered backward, shaking his head violently. You're not her, he whispered. The face smiled a wide, slow, dreadful stretch and the mouth moved again in Lily's voice. I'm lonely down here. The fog swirled violently and the face dissolved into it. The figure below took a slow step toward the ladder, one hand rising, fingers extending like broken branches cracking open from inside. The tower groaned under pressure. Something was climbing it. Not quickly, slowly, deliberately, savoring every inch. Wood creaked. Nails snapped from the supports. The whispers beneath him shifted into deep, guttural laughter, thick and wet like mud filling lungs. Ethan stumbled back to the center of the tower. He scanned frantically for a weapon, anything, any tool that could buy him seconds. His eyes landed on the emergency flare gun clipped near the window. He grabbed it with shaking hands, loaded the only flare inside, and aimed it downward at the ladder. The creature's hand emerged first, long, skin stretched tight, fingers too many and too thin. Ethan fired without thinking. The flare shot downward and exploded in a burst of screaming red light. The forest lit up like a nightmare. For one brief second, Ethan saw everything. Shapes, dozens of them, standing between the trees. Human-like but twisted, faces blurred, limbs warped like melted wax. Every missing ranger. Every lost hiker. Everyone the forest had ever taken. They stood motionless, staring up at the tower with wide, empty eyes. And at the center of them all, illuminated in burning red light, was the tall figure climbing toward him. Its face had no features, just a smooth, stretched surface like skin pulled over a skull. Yet Ethan could feel it smiling. The flare burned out, and the world fell back into darkness. Ethan fell to his knees, panic shattering the last of his strength. There was no escaping. No running. No help. The thing was seconds away from reaching the top. The wood under him cracked as weight shifted up the ladder. He heard a breath behind the wall, long, cold, drawn through a hollow throat. Ethan crawled backward until his back hit the window frame. He stared out into the black forest, remembering the normal life he once had. The city. The noise. The warmth. The people. He wondered if anyone would ever find his body. Or if he would become another silent shadow wandering the forest floor, another whisper in the fog. The hatch door began to open. Slowly. Quietly. Fingers curled around the metal edge, dragging it upward with unnatural gentleness. Ethan couldn't move. Couldn't scream. Couldn't breathe. A head began to rise through the opening, alien and human at the same time, smelling of decay and wet soil. The featureless face turned toward him and then froze. Still. Listening. Ethan didn't understand until he heard a new sound in the trees. Not whispers. Not footsteps. Something else. A far-off rumble. A vibration. A voice he hadn't expected to hear again. The radio on his hip crackled, then a deep, raw, human voice burst through. Ethan, run. Connor Hayes. Alive. Or something pretending to be alive. The creature jerked its head toward the radio, hissing in a sound that didn't belong on Earth. Ethan seized the moment. He stood, grabbed the flare gun even empty, and swung it with everything he had. The metal crashed into the creature's featureless head, cracking the skin like thin ice. A scream tore through the tower, shaking the windows. Ethan shoved past the creature, leaping over the hatch, and grabbed the ladder. He didn't climb down, he slid, burning his palms raw on the metal rails. Halfway down, the wood above exploded as the creature lunged out of the tower, its long arms scraping along the sides. Ethan hit the ground hard, legs buckling. He forced himself up, sprinting into the forest. The fog swirled violently, chasing him, colliding with trees like a living thing trying to cut him off. Every direction he turned, the forest bent against him, branches moving, trunks shifting, roots rising like tripwires. The whispers followed him, screaming, wailing, calling his name. Shapes ran beside him, glimpses of broken faces and half-formed bodies. He didn't look. He ran. He burst through thick fog and saw, in the distance, the one thing he never expected, the main dirt road. Headlights. A truck. Engine running. Connor Hayes sitting inside. His skin pale. His eyes dead. Yet he whispered, "Get in." Ethan didn't ask. He ran to the passenger door and threw himself inside. Connor slammed the gas. The truck roared down the road as the fog behind them rose like a tidal wave, swallowing the trees, chasing them with impossible speed. Ethan stared at Connor's face, it flickered like a dying flame. Parts of him solid. Parts of him transparent. Parts of him broken. "You're not alive," Ethan whispered. Connor nodded slowly. "No. But I'm not gone either." The road twisted. The forest roared behind them. Connor's voice cracked, "If we don't reach the edge, it will pull you back. And this time it won't let go." Ethan clung to the door as the truck hit a broken patch of road. The forest screamed behind them, an inhuman, ear-tearing howl that shook the mirrors. Connor slammed his foot harder. The fog swallowed everything except the faint glow of the exit road sign ahead. 500 feet. 400. 3. The headlights flickered. Connor's hands dissolved, reformed, dissolved again as he fought the wheel. At 100 feet, Ethan looked back. The tall creature was running on all fours, body snapping and bending like bones were breaking with each step, closing the distance with horrifying speed. It opened a mouth that hadn't existed before, wide, gaping, filled with teeth that weren't teeth but jagged fragments of something stolen from its victims. 50 feet. The truck engine screamed. 20 feet. Connor yelled, "Jump!" The truck jerked sideways as the creature slammed into the back, flipping it into the ditch. Ethan launched himself out the door, rolling onto the asphalt. He crawled forward, lungs burning, vision fading. The creature burst from the fog behind him. And stopped. Frozen at the invisible line between forest soil and public road. Unable to cross. It stood there, trembling with fury, its face shapeless yet hateful. Ethan crawled backward as it pressed its long fingers into the asphalt, leaving burns where it touched. Then, slowly, it retreated into the fog. The forest swallowed it. Ethan lay shaking on the empty road as dawn crawled across the sky. He never went back. But he hears the whispers sometimes. In fog. In forests. In dreams. And somewhere far inside Pine Valley, the missing rangers still wander. Looking for him. Subscribe, if you made it out.